You're watching Viewpoint. We've also sat down with the Gibraltar Pro Life Movement and some of its international supporters. Rachel Mackenzie has been on the rock with the Gibraltar Pro Life Movement discussing Rachaels Vineyard, which pitches itself as a safe place to renew and rebuild your life after experiencing the trauma of abortion. The charity says it can help individuals experience God's love and compassion on a profound level and offers healing weekends in a supportive, confidential environment.
So Rachael's Vineyard is a weekend retreat. It's a safe place where women and men, because this doesn't just affect women, this strips women of their motherhood, but it strips fathers of their fatherhood and grandparents. It affects the whole family. And so Rachael's Vineyard is a place where they can come and grieve, because any death we have to grieve, but with abortion there's the added layer of, well, I signed that paper, it's my fault that my children aren't here today. So it's a real place of healing where people can come, of any faith, of no faith, it's not important, but it's just a place where people can express and realise they're not on their own.
So your background is in psychology?
Actually it isn't. My background is that I've walked where these mothers have walked, and I've walked where the grief that they've gone through, because I myself have had 2 abortions. My children aren't here today. Jude and Paul are not here because I made the decision to abort them, because I thought that was the only choice I had.
And how do you feel about that now?
I can't bring them back. I can't bring Jude and Paul back, but what I can do is prevent other Jude and Pauls dying across the world and in England by telling my story and explaining that, first of all, that one choice is no choice. It's not a choice when it's not an informed decision. And when you realise that it was a child, when you realise that the unborn are human and they're alive and they're growing, I can't think of a reason good enough, and neither can anybody that comes to Rachael's Vineyard, of why their children aren't here today. So the reason why I aborted wasn't due to rape, or wasn't due to one of the very rare incidences that people think, well, that's a good enough reason. My reason was fear. I just couldn't think of any reason that I could possibly cope, and I didn't tell anybody, and I was very young, and I went to a family planning centre really looking for help, and the only option I was given was abortion. In England, there are 4 reasons, 4 categories why you can have an abortion. And one of those categories is if it's going to affect your mental health. And I think what's really important, if this is the only thing that I can get across to Gibraltarians, is that mental health can't be measured. And mental health, my dad had got schizophrenia, and that can be measured, that can be diagnosed, or bipolar. But when they're talking about mental health in the situation of an abortion, I was asked, will this affect your mental health? And I said yes, and they signed the paper. Everything affects our mental health. If you don't have a coffee in the morning, it's going to affect your mental health. And for the 4 reasons, that one reason in England is the reason why 98%, it's 97.8%, so 98% of all abortions are done under the mental health part. And so my first abortion, I was 24 weeks, that's 6 months pregnant, and I chose an abortion. How did I feel after? Relief. Because I saw a problem, this was my solution, and I felt relief. My body didn't feel relief. My body went through quite a trauma that I was still having operations for up until last year. I thought, well, I can just get on with my life. But you see, before the abortion I was a mother, and after the abortion I was still a mother. I was just now a mother of 2 dead children. They just weren't here. That's the only difference between any other mother. And so my second abortion, again, I felt nothing but relief at the time. And for me, I didn't realise, you don't realise that you're in denial. How can you realise? But it's the first stage of grief is denial. And I was in that stage for many, many years. And also I went through the second stage of anger, and I was very angry and in denial. And it wasn't until I was 38 that I suddenly realised I had a problem and I needed to sort this problem, and I sought Rachael's Vineyard. I'm smiling because it was at Rachel's Vineyard. There was a moment of absolute clarity where I realised, you see, I was grieving the children that could have been, not the children that were. And it was at Rachel's Vineyard. Everybody was crying and I wasn't crying. I'd picked up this button as a child where I didn't have to show my feelings, and I used it to get over abuse and to get over some traumas as a child. And I took that into my adult life. And at Rachel's Vineyard, people were crying, and I realised, oh, it's because they're mums and dads, and I'm not a mum. And one of the men there, when I told that to everybody, well, it's because you're mums and dads, he turned round and he said, Rachel, it's not that you could have been a mum, you are a mum. And that's what I realised, and that's what I got out of Rachel's Vineyard, is that I am a mum. And I'm a mum today of Jude and Paul, you know, that just aren't here.
So you bring that experience to Gibraltar. You've had a question and answer session with, organised by the Gibraltar Pro Life Movement. What sort of questions were you asked?
Oh, it was so interesting, and it was wonderful to have such a mix of people, you know, because especially there was some great pro-choice people there, you know, because often they ask the questions that we're all really thinking deep down, because you see, pro-choice people are coming from a really good place. You know, they've got such big hearts and they want to help these women, especially women that, you know, have got they've got too many children already and they can't cope and they're in poverty, or the children, you know, the people that are raped. You know, how can we put a woman through this? And I think what surprised them first of all is my second abortion. I was awake, and I watched the abortionist, because I was awake, count the body parts to my baby. And so I can't ignore that or close that off forever. And I think that's part of my story that I always have to share with people. And so when we abort a child that was conceived through rape, it has still got 2 arms and 2 legs. You know, it is still a child. And I don't think there's anything worse than rape and incest. I think they're the worst crimes. But what I always question is, first of all, is why is it that the unborn child gets the death sentence? Secondly, the rape victims that have come to Rachel's Vineyard, they said it was the second act of violence that was done to them, and it never unraped them. Having an abortion for rape doesn't unrape you. And I think they really enjoyed being able to, you know, the pro-choicers being able to freely say how they felt. But my value here today isn't by the way I was conceived. My value is because I'm human and I deserve the same value and rights as everybody else. You see, this is a human rights issue.
Yeah. So you've been talking largely about your own experiences, Rachel, but you obviously have a view of the Gibraltar legislation.
I'm really shocked of how it's actually up until birth for a start, which I think that's where, when pro-choicers realise this, they're like, well, no, that can't possibly, it says 12 weeks, when actually it isn't. You know, first of all it says 12 weeks, and then under that there's a subheading where it expresses that, you know, if it's for mental health reasons, and I've explained what that means, then actually it's up until birth. And I know there was a pro-choicer that was saying, well, you know, they can go over to Spain. Well, why can't we have it here? You know, that's giving people choice. But actually part of choice is having time to make a choice. And having it further away just gives people a few more days to think about it.
That's your interpretation of the legislation, Rachel. The Gibraltar for Yes campaign group has interpreted it certainly differently and are stressing the 12-week limit.
If only it was 12 weeks, but when you read the next sentence, it completely changes that. The 12-week limit on the next subheading on the B section, it expresses that, you know, that limit will be extended up until 40 weeks for mental health reasons or for grave reasons. But that can be interpreted any way you want it to be. You know, in Ireland they thought it was only for a certain, you know, reason. In England, when it first came through, it was going to be safe and rare. And it, you know, in the first year there was 50,000 abortions. We're now up to 200,000 abortions. The rape hasn't gone up. The poverty hasn't gone up. It's just 98%. It's because women fear this is the only choice they've got. And if people have had enough time to think about it, why is there so much regret?
Rachel Mackenzie, who has been on the rock with the Gibraltar Pro Life Movement. The abortion referendum is in 5 weeks' time. We'll have more coverage for you between now and then.